Hi, Irem.
Hello, Frank.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. It's not sharp, is it?
Uh, your connection is a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah. Okay, let me check.
Oh, hello? You froze. Okay, hello? Something happened and I lost Frank. Just gonna add him again. Oh, I cannot add you now, Frank. Wow, that's so weird. Let me see again. Uh, I don't know why, but now it doesn't give me the option to add you. I just added you like 30 seconds ago, Frank. Now I cannot. Okay. Are you connected from the same device as you were connected just before, Frank? Ah, okay. Now I think you're back. Now I can add you. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Now we should be joining the session soon. Let me see. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Lucina. Hi, everyone. Today, Frank and I will be talking about the rising alcohol levels in wine. I'm trying to add Frank to the session, and just bear with me a little bit, please, so then I can add Frank. Okay, it is super weird, Frank, because now it's gone again. It doesn't give me the option to add you. Hi, Michael. I don't know. It's very weird. Like, it was possible to add you. Hola, Ricard. It was possible to add you just like a few seconds ago. Now it's gone. Can you, Frank? Can you send a request to be in the session? There's an option that you can send a request. Maybe that will work. Okay, now your camera is back. Now I can add you. Let's see. It says yes. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm a
Welcome
bit,
back.
for some reason. mm, okay, let me see if I can.
Frank is looking for a nice spot
Well,
for a good connection.
this.
Yes, now I think it's good.
Yeah, good.
Do you hear me well? Because I'm hearing my own voice as well.
I hear you very well.
Okay. Can everyone hear us well? Both me and Frank?
I hope so. Good evening, everybody.
Hi Miriam, hi Carlos. Because you know what, I can. There's how do you call it? Like resonance of my own voice. So I hear like a metallic noise.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a little bit frustrating for myself because I talk and then it comes back to me again.
I
Let's
think
see.
that's how
Let's
your husband
try.
hears you too.
Sorry, what?
That is how your husband hears you as well.
Yeah, actually,
Well,
yes. Echo.
that's
Thank you for the
twice.
word. Yeah, there's an echo.
Uh,
Do you hear that as well, Frank?
no, not at all. I hear you once.
Okay. Mark says there's a lot of background noise somewhere. Yeah, Mark, I also hear that background noise. Just a second. I'm just gonna try to connect my headphones again. Hello, how's it now? Okay. Ricardo said, oh, so my sound is not really good. Okay, sorry guys. Hello, hello, hello. Can you mute one of your devices? Yeah, I'm only having one device, Mark. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what can I mean, if we don't have a problem with camera, then we have a problem with sound.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, people are commenting that they can hear you well, but my sound is not really good.
I hear you well and without any disturbance.
Okay. Okay, so then I'll do the less talking today, and you do the more talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start the rising alcohol levels.
Yes.
Yeah. Where do you want to start? I know, I mean, obviously you will comment about it, but maybe we should start a little bit of why the alcohol levels has been rising.
Yeah, that's true. Let's put it a bit in perspective. Because of course, we can blame climate change for it, but that's not the only reason. It's also changed viticultural practices or winemaking practices, whatever you want to call it, that also play a role. I mean, it depends, of course, a bit on where you are, but let's just say as nearby as 30 years ago, which from my perspective is nearby because I was already in the business. Up until the 80s, we had plenty of very cold vintages in Europe. And actually, it was usually a challenge to get sufficient alcohol in wines, meaning that quite often the growing season was too cold. Grapes were not perfectly ripe. And in most of France and surely in Germany and Austria and all that, chaptalization was very common because there was actually a lack of alcohol. And with chaptalization, people tried to increase the alcohol, of course, adding a bit of sugar for fermentation, and with that give the wine a little bit more substance, etc. Although I know, I mean, you could even argue that actually chaptalization is not really improving the wine, but nevertheless, people thought it did. And then we talked about Parkerization and Robert Parker, meanwhile, maybe 4 weeks ago. And I think Parker has been very influential but he was not the only one, of course, in getting growers to harvest later, looking for better mature grapes. Because with not just to get more sugar, but also to get riper tannins in red wines, etc. So by later harvesting, by lowering yields, that's actually also quite important. Gradually, grapes were getting riper and riper at the moment of harvest, and actually in that stage it improved wines. But then the climate change began to play its role, and I think climate change in European wine is really noticeable now since maybe roughly 20 years, really noticeable. Probably it started before, but the last 20 years we hardly had really cold years. And then a new reality came because people had begun to postpone harvest, to lower yields, etc. But then they began to, and actually winemaking techniques, I forgot about that, but it's not such long time ago that all the top estates in Bordeaux, the top chateaus, and every top grower in Austria and many Burgundy growers were using reverse osmosis. They invested in a reverse osmosis machine to get actually the juice more concentrated before fermentation, which was also leading to higher alcohol, very simply. But then the climate change began to kick in, and the new reality was that alcohol was actually getting higher and higher. Now, and now the question is that a problem? And to be honest, I do not always see it as a problem. I think it's a bit exaggerated. That it is again something. It's a bit of a trend if you are a wine lover nowadays or a wine geek that you will say, alcohol levels shouldn't be too high, should be lower, blah blah blah. And of course, some very trendy growers get into that, like we already talked about that, like Terroir al Limite in Priorat is an example in Spain, who really tries to push his alcohol as low as possible. But for me, that does not necessarily mean that wines are actually better just because you are trying to get the alcohol down. I don't really believe in that. You ignore the fact that the full flavor potential of a wine is only shown when the grapes are perfectly ripe. So harvesting a bit unripe does not really improve wines. I do not agree with that, and I'm not so afraid of alcohol myself. In my Navarra Garnacha project, the project I'm doing with Ferdinand Meyer, actually, with some very old 100-year-old Garnacha vineyards in the north of Navarra, we told the winemaker we want perfectly ripe grapes and we are not afraid of alcohol. Let that alcohol go into the 14. We don't care. And the same for our rosé. Our rosés got over 14, and we're not afraid of it. We don't care. Because at the end of the day, it's about balance and flavor intensity, and the wines have that, you know.
Yeah.
So that is my point.
The thing is, like a few things that I want to comment what you mentioned. Just lately, we are more blaming the alcohol rise to climate change, global warming, but there has been some studies made, like this, to scientifically prove that if is the rises in the alcohol level, can it be really explained by global warming? But then the studies show that much increase cannot be really explained by global warming. They said global warming wouldn't give that much increase in the high alcohol level.
Okay,
So there are like biological departments of some universities, especially in the United States, there are some studies. So in the end, like, is it like really man-made to kind of meet the demand of the consumer, like the sweeter perception, the roughness, and then kind of balance with the, I don't know, the tannins, softer tannins?
Well, it confirms of what I just said, that actually winemaking techniques and picking dates and all that have been more influential. And apparently, as you say, scientific evidence is showing that as well, that the problem is more coming from the human side than from the climate change. Could very well be, actually. I'm not sure. But you know what? I think it also depends on the region, for example. I'm thinking of Südtirol, Alto Adige. When we think of Alto Adige in the north of Italy, we kind of think of it as a cool climate region. The truth is, it's not true. It's no longer true. It is bloody hot in summer, really, believe me. At the Caltagirone, Bolzano is actually more or less the hottest city of Italy. It is often warmer than Napoli or Palermo. Not because, and of course it's much more to the north, but that is because that area ends in a sort of a valley, and the heat sort of builds up inside that valley. And so I think there, so you see what I mean? I think for natural reasons, there's a difference between one reason and one region and the other, as in how far the climate change has changed things. Yeah? But sure, it's not purely human, because if you think of Champagne, for example, where they've had a series of incredibly early vintages, and by the way, this year is looking like even more crazy. If things continue as they go now, we might see the earliest vintage ever in Champagne, and that's climate change. That's really not human.
So then the other side of the story is, I know that you're not afraid of it, you don't really care, but then if it is really climate change, now the climate change is getting worse and worse, it's getting warm again, and so on and so forth. So then if it is climate change, then the alcohol levels will keep increasing. And what's going to happen in 10 years, 20 years? Aren't you a little bit concerned about that?
That's a good question. So actually, it's quite difficult to still to understand what you're saying, Irem, because the sound is really terrible. It's very metallic.
I know. Sorry.
But don't worry, don't worry. But you were asking where is this all going to end? Huh? That was basically your
Yeah.
question. And that's a good question. Again, it depends. I suppose it depends on the region where you are. But for example, in Südtirol, what you see there is that estates, people like Lagerder, people like Franz Haas, who are growers wines, they are going higher and higher with the vineyards, and Haas is really pushing it up to a crazy level because Haas is fanatic about Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir doesn't support the heat, so he's going higher and higher, even up to levels where it's not allowed or almost not allowed actually to still plant vines. But the problem is this is not the solution for the area of Südtirol, because the reality of Südtirol is that I don't know how much exactly, but I would reckon more than 70% of the wines of Südtirol are produced by cooperatives, meaning the grapes come from small growers. And these growers are down there in the valley where it's hot. And these growers cannot move up for the simple reason they do not own ground up there, up the hill. So it's easy to say Südtirol should go higher, but the reality is that it's not possible. Only to some extent, but not really, you know. But again, it also depends on the region. So I think the climate change is going to be a bigger problem for well, the size of the problem depends on the region where you are. Let's put it like this. Huh? There are also regions. I mean, I remember our last tour in the Mosel Valley, where one grower, maybe it was Oliver Haag, I'm not sure. He said that until now the climate change has been to our benefit. We enjoy the climate change because the problem of bad harvest, unripe grapes, and all that's far behind us now. And it's true. I think one of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons why German wine is so much better is because of climate change. But with that, the alcohol levels are going up, and I remember. I'm not sure about the vintage anymore, but I have seen probably 2003. But I've seen one day a dry Riesling from Van Winning in the Pfalz, which had 14.5 alcohol, which is huge. But I tasted that wine, and it was still a very good wine, but maybe not as good as wines from slightly less hot vintages. That's also true. But it was still very good.
There's also another approach for growers, especially in the southern Europe. They argue that biodynamic viticulture can be a problem, like a solution for them, because they say that biodynamic viticulture needs to be more concentrated for
Yeah.
early picking.
Yeah. Yes. It's good that you mentioned that because I was in my preparation for today. I was thinking of that as well. Especially my good friend Bernhard Ott in Wagram, who told me that. I know him for a long time now, Bernhard, and one day he was telling me, we were talking about his biodynamic approach and all that, and I said, Bernhard, what do you consider as the most important benefit, the most important advantage of working biodynamically? And he said what you just said. He said, actually, that it helps me to get perfectly ripe grapes with lower sugar levels. And so his wines have less alcohol than they did 15 years ago. That's what he said. However, thinking in my experience, oh my God, is that your husband?
No, I don't know what's happening. I'm scared to make a comment because the sound is horrible. But the
Yeah.
weather in Barcelona is really bad today. It's like very windy. Maybe that's
Yeah,
it.
but
I don't know.
it's got to do with the connection. But anyway, to come back to biodynamic, I was thinking of another friend of mine, Olivier Humbrecht, and I remember wines from Olivier with sky high alcohol levels, and more biodynamic than Olivier Humbrecht you will not easily find. So I remember a Pinot Gris Rang in the Tan. I forgot the vintage. It was it had over 15 alcohol, and it still wasn't dry. It was still a bit sweet with residual sugar. And I have to be honest, I didn't like that wine. It was unbalanced. I could not imagine the purpose of that wine actually. So apparently, biodynamic does. I don't know. Maybe without biodynamic, the wine would have had 18 alcohol. I don't know. I have no idea. But it's wrong to think that biodynamic automatically leads to lower alcohol levels. Apparently. Yeah.
But you're not worried with it anyways, so you don't care that you're not really concerned with it, no?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I think there are lovely wines with high alcohol. Think of Chateauneuf du Pape. Chateauneuf du Pape always has high alcohol. It can be delicious wine. And high alcohol can make the wine smoother, richer, fuller, and I don't see the problem. But on the other hand, yeah, of course, it depends. I mean, if you're looking for a thirst quencher, an easy drinking, refreshing wine, yeah, okay, I admit. Then the high alcohol can be a problem. I agree, of course. But but you know, let's take the commercial perspective. I'll tell you one thing. Sure, there is a small category of wine geeks, sommeliers, people around you and me, who are looking at alcohol levels, who are talking about alcohol levels, who want them to be lower, who claim that lower alcohol is better. But they are not representative of the market, because the market, the whole market together, actually is favorable to higher alcohol percentages. Believe me, I can see it not just in Russia. I've seen it over time in many supermarket chains, etc. High alcohol is not a problem. I actually suspect that most people don't even watch the label for the alcohol percentage. I think the average consumer is not looking at the label how high the alcohol is. He just buys it.
Maybe they don't look at the label when they buy, but then obviously some people, if they're less tolerant to the alcohol, then maybe they won't repeat the purchasing that wine because of the high alcohol level.
Could be, but yeah, I doubt that. I really doubt that. I mean, there are plenty of very successful wine regions in the world where alcohol is by necessity high. The whole south of France, Chateauneuf du Pape, Priorat, most of Spain. You know, what are we talking about? Spain. You know, red wines usually the alcohol is really high. I don't know. I don't get the impression that people are too bothered with it. Just a small group, I think.
Okay, but let's say that if you want to compete with that, if you want to kind of stop that alcohol levels going higher and higher, what would you give as a good solution? Like, yes, reverse osmosis to get rid of the alcohol, but then does it affect the taste? Or more to treat it in the vineyard with the viticulture techniques?
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't go for reverse osmosis. I don't know. I wouldn't go. I don't know. I wouldn't go to earlier picking. I don't believe in that. Grapes should be perfectly ripe, in every sense, of course. But yes, changing viticultural practices and yeah, well, but generally, I do believe that biodynamics can be helpful. Then in winemaking, if you do not destem, so you do a whole bunch fermentation, you lower your alcohol. But having said that, it of course has a bit of effect on the taste of the wine. You get that sort of light stalkiness, freshness in the wine, which you like or you don't like. I think it's a character you find in many wines of the Sierra de Gredos, where you have a lot of these sort of hipster winemakers who like to make wine with a whole bunch fermentation. But you can taste it in the wine. I don't mind actually, but not everybody likes that style. So there's no easy answer. In any case, there is no easy answer.
What about some certain type of yeast?
Yeah, that's true.
Solution.
maybe, maybe, maybe. But I bet that then the answer would be in sort of industrial yeast, huh? Because I think natural yeast, I don't know, it depends of course, but with natural yeast you will have less control on that. So I'm sure there are actually natural yeasts that lead to lower alcohols, but there are also natural yeasts that lead to high alcohols. You're never in control with natural yeast. But yeah, it could be actually. That's an interesting remark. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Also, one other thing could be maybe if we go back to the vineyard to select certain type of clones, which gives, I don't know, maybe which lowers the rate of photosynthesis or like accumulates less sugars.
Oh, sure. Um, and canopy management in general can also be used to reduce the alcohol bit, to get ripe grapes without too much sugar. So there are definitely all kind of ways of looking at it. Huh? But I think for the bulk of the wine industry, the answer will probably be in winemaking techniques, in using whatever spinning cones in the future or reverse osmosis to lower alcohol levels. And it's not perfect, but for average standard quality wine, it doesn't matter too much, I suppose.
But also reverse osmosis is an added cost on the wine because not all the wineries they have this equipment. They have to rent it, and even though you have it, it is expensive and it's also time consuming and labor.
Yes, it's expensive to buy the machine or to rent. It is yes, it's labor intense, and you need enormous amounts of water for it. Actually, enormous amounts of water, which is maybe also an issue in Spain. You know, like with the shortage of water in Spain, do you want to use so much water just for doing this kind of tricks on wine? I'm not sure, but yeah, it's an option. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I try to speak as less as possible. I don't know if you want to add something and give a different perspective of the topic, just feel free.
Yeah. So actually, your sound is much better than in the beginning now.
Yeah, I put the headphones again, so maybe that's
And that sort of metallic sound is gone now. But no, from my point of view, I think we've covered a lot of things because I wanted to talk about biodynamics. I wanted certainly to mention that I am not so preoccupied with higher alcohol levels. I don't think it's necessarily a problem. And there are plenty of wines that I really like with high alcohol. There's one thing you need to be a bit careful about, and that is, of course, when the alcohol is getting too high during fermentation. If the grapes are too ripe, you get an increased risk of volatility and all that. And that's, of course, something I do not really like in wine. So, I'm not advocating wines with more than 15 alcohol, because that usually gives problems in the fermentation. But the fact that a good bottle of wine has 14.5 alcohol is not something that generally shocks me or But maybe people have questions.
Yeah, if you see any questions, feel free to read them, Frank.
I don't see them. I think you should see them.
Yeah, I don't see. I mean, I see a comment from Albert saying that I believe that the alcohol today is 2% higher than in the 80s.
Yes, could very well be. And in the 80s, the wines in the north of Europe were chaptalized. But actually, talking about that, I'm thinking of something now. I remember a conversation I had with a grower in Alsace in the 1990s, and they had a string of very warm vintages. And so I said to him, so obviously you didn't chaptalize now. And then he looked at me as if I was crazy, and he said, of course we chaptalize. And I said, but why would you chaptalize if you've got such a warm vintage? And he said, well, it's very simple. If I've got 12.5 alcohol in a cold vintage with chaptalization, and I've got a hot vintage, well, that brings me naturally 12.5 or 13. I have to chaptalize to make sure I reach the 13.5, 14. because I want to keep that difference between a cold and a warm vintage in the alcohol of my wine. I was thinking, well, this is totally crazy because, and I'm sure actually that this is still happening to some extent, that people are actually still chaptalizing in the north of Europe despite higher sugar levels than 20 years ago. But Albert is right. The wines have got a lot more alcohol than they did 20 years ago. Yeah, for sure.
Or even maybe it can be even more than we know. Yes, obviously there are laws that you cannot really, to some certain degrees, yes, you can round it up the alcohol level, but you cannot go above the 0.5. But again, the labels, do they really reflect the reality?
No, quite often not. Because in any case, it's very simple. If the alcohol is really high, then people will round it off downwards. So if the alcohol is 14.8, they will write 14.5. But if the alcohol is 11.6, they will write 12. And so you understand what I mean? And they all do that. But also I am pretty sure that there are quite some wines where the label says 14 or 14 and a half, and the alcohol is actually in the 15. I'm very sure of that. It happens again and again, because for the simple reason that it is not all too often controlled.
One last thing that I want to mention, I read something really interesting, interesting study about, again, the global warming.
Yeah.
Saying that global warming, this increase in the temperature, doesn't increase necessarily the alcohol level, but they're arguing that the more carbon dioxide is available in the air is making the plants to produce more sugar. So not necessarily the temperature level, but the increase in the carbon dioxide level in the air.
Yeah. Makes sense to me, no? I'm not a scientist, but it makes sense to me. It's very well be true, actually. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. But since the carbon dioxide in the air is also increasing, in the atmosphere is also increasing continuously, I suppose it means that one day or another the industry will really have to define an answer to this problem of increasing sugar levels. I saw a question from Valerio Cotea. What do you think about de-alcoholization? Actually, it's something you probably better ask Valerio, because he's the scientist here. But what do I think about it? I don't know. But we should always make the difference between sort of standard quality wine and expensive high quality wine. And if I buy a bottle of wine of 5-6 euros in a supermarket, I really don't care whether it is chaptalized, went through reverse osmosis, de-alcoholized with a spinning cone. I don't care, if the wine is technically good and enjoyable, nobody cares actually. But as soon as we start talking about €100 Bordeaux or Bourgogne, then the whole question gets a different meaning, of course. And would I like to see a Bourgogne, a Burgundy producer, de-alcoholizing his wine? I'm not sure actually. It doesn't sound good, but maybe I shouldn't make a problem out of it. I don't know. Maybe we have to be more practical, but we always like our expensive wines to be less manipulated, of course.
Yeah. To birth it,
Yeah. What is Torres doing about infusing alcohol?
Torres, actually, now we have a wine. It's a recent release, zero alcohol, 0%.
Yeah.
So it is exact. I mean, actually, you're making the wine, normal methods, winemaking, and then reverse osmosis, getting rid of the entire alcohol.
I know those
But
ones
it is
actually.
because, it is now Torres is making that wine to meet the demands of the consumer, because there's also now the trend for the less calorie, lighter food, and also there are some customers that they don't drink alcohol, but they like the taste of the wine. So it is like meeting the demands of the consumer.
Yeah, I know, and he planted vineyards higher in the Pyrenees.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So normally Torres is instead of like de-alcoholizing the wine, wants to compete with it in the vineyard. So going higher altitude, to compete with the climate change and reducing the carbon emission and so on.
Yeah.
But the reason that we do this wine is to meet the consumer demand.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. But for his high-end wines, the company is not too concerned about increasing alcohol, because I'm sure that, I don't know, Smulders nowadays has more alcohol than it had 25 years ago. I suppose.
Yeah,
Must like.
yeah. Yeah, obviously. I mean, it's the natural outcome. It has more alcohol than before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Sorry for the connection today, everyone. Sorry for torturing you with my metallic noise.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
okay. And now it's good, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Frank.
Good. We haven't defined next week's subject yet, have we?
We did. I already published them.
Oh, really? My God,
Yeah,
what did I
remember
do?
we talked about Chardonnay and Jerez. Remember?
Oh, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
So
Monday because of Pentecosta. Yes, exactly.
yeah.
So it's Wednesday and Friday. Yeah.
Yes.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Okay. Very
We'll
good.
see you Wednesday and Friday. Have a great weekend, Frank. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Same to you. Do behave. Don't go out too much. Respect the 1.5 meters, and stay healthy.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.